What legislation are they currently considering that has this sector so engaged that they're boosting their spending by 100%, right? So there undoubtedly are some bills that are floating around Congress right now that are either incredibly beneficial or incredibly detrimental to business interests. And so you'd want to know what explains that change. Okay. I guess Hollywood is down a little bit. So home builders, they probably don't have a lot of money. You can see, you know, I don't know what's got the dairy farmers so excited. So anyway, I recommend this website. We will go back to it when we talk about campaigns and elections, because we'll want to see who is donating, particularly to the presidential campaigns, because it can be very instructive. Okay. Not surprisingly, when it comes to deciding whether or not to make a donation to the campaign of a particular member of Congress, you're in a prisoner's dilemma. What's the prisoner's dilemma? What's the prisoner's dilemma that these groups find themselves in?
They both want to support there's better people did it, so both of them are going to have to do it.
Right. They would both be better off if they didn't have to pay, right, to get access. And if nobody paid, right, for access, then, you know, nobody would be worse off, right? But invariably, you can't trust that everybody is going to agree not to make a donation. Somebody is going to defect, right, and pay for that access. That means everybody's got to pay, right? So that's the dilemma they're in, because if the other group contributes and you don't, then you don't get the access, you don't get the favors in exchange. Social movements generally succeed if they have a strong network of organizations. And if there are enough organizations there to support policy change. So you're going to need you're going to need good entrepreneurs, right? So talented people, right? So you can't, you know, will the civil rights movement get as far as it did without a charismatic leader like Martin Luther King, right? Who could reach out and really essentially be an effective outside lobbyist, right? Because what was the outside lobbying that Martin Luther King was engaging in? So, well, the March on Washington, but Martin Luther King was obviously mobilizing people within the civil rights movement, but who else was he mobilizing? So essentially he was mobilizing whites in America, right? Because he had a charismatic message, right, that basically spoke to people, right, that were outside the civil rights movement, and that put pressure, right, on Congress, because you had increasingly large numbers of voters who became supportive of civil rights issues, and that happened because people on the outside could observe things like the protests going on, could see Martin Luther King speaking, you know, at the March on Washington, and the message resonated.
So mobilizing is like getting people to realize that their group is actually good, or actually bringing people into the group?
But it's all those things. So mobilizing not only means getting people within the group active or bringing people into the group, it's also mobilizing support outside the group. So that's, you know, important to think about. And so especially for social movements that are representing a minority viewpoint, or a minority position or are benefiting a minority population, and by minority I mean just less than the majority, right? Then you're not going to be able to succeed without mobilizing some element of the majority to get them to support your cause, right? To get them to essentially put votes behind, votes or money behind your cause. So entrepreneurs are important. Overcoming the free riding problem is important. We already talked a little bit about the Tea Party, which is a good example of a social movement that's kind of currently active and relatively new, and a social movement where the jury's out. We don't quite know how successful the Tea Party is going to be. We have a lot more group activity in the United States, and two main reasons for that. One, we talked about this before, the access points. There are a lot of places you can go. You can sue, which means you can get access into the court system. You can go lobby your governor or your president or your mayor, right? So we have all these different executives. We have state, local, federal legislatures, all these places where you can go to try and influence policy. That means that there's more and more opportunities to lobby in our system of government than a lot of others that are more closed or have more limited access points. Also, in a lot of other countries, they don't allow the kind of lobbying that we have. So you just can't form a group and then go knock on the door, a member of Congress. A lot of countries have what's known as corporatist systems, which basically means that there are designated groups that support particular interests. So like the government will have designated a labor organization. And only the labor organization that has been designated by the government may go talk to government officials. So essentially all lobbying in a corporatist style country is done through one group that has essentially been said, you're the representative for this interest.
So if you have a problem or want something changed, you have to go to that labor group to say, this needs to be changed.
This is the issue we need to be talking about with the government, right? So it's like, it's not a free-for-all, like in the United States, where anybody can go lobby, assuming you can raise the money to do so, or deliver the voters, or be entrepreneurial and figure out a way, right, to get access. In a lot of countries, access is restricted. Social movements, interest groups run into a problem, or a problem that we see is that we think certain groups speak for everybody in a particular population or that have a particular interest. And that's just not the case. And oftentimes, some interest groups or elements of a movement will be what people think that movement is. So an example for this. What do you think of when I say animal rights movement? PETA. What is PETA about? Like, what is PETA is very aggressive, throw blood on people's fur kind of group, right? PETA is a very in-your-face kind of interest group. PETA has an outsized reputation of, sort of in the public's mind. So when people think about animal rights movement, they think about PETA, and a lot of people have very negative, view of PETA. And so that can be often frustrating to other groups that are trying to promote, fight cruelty to animals and promote animal rights. And so that's a problem that social movements and interest group sectors face. which is what happens when one group or one segment of a movement become more powerful or become perceived as group. Other problem is that in every social movement, and this is just the way it is, those movements tend to represent the people that are best off in the movement. One of the big criticisms of the NAACP from the very start and all the way through the civil rights movement and even today is that the NAACP focuses on issues that are of particular interest and importance to African Americans who are already in the middle class or above. So fighting, for instance, for voting rights is great, except if you can't even feed your family, right, then really worrying about whether or not you can vote is probably not your number one, right, concern. So a lot of criticism has been put forth towards that organization for focusing on issues that are not the kinds of bread and butter issues that, you know, most African Americans need to be most worried about. That was a criticism, especially in the 1940s and 50s and 60s of the NAACP, was that they were out of touch with ordinary African Americans. Okay, we'll finish up with this. Groups can be very powerful if they have solved their collective action problems and have coordinated, right, their activities. That makes it possible for minorities to essentially make end runs around majorities. So the example the book uses is how the NRA has managed to be so successful. The NRA has been tremendously successful even at fighting gun control measures that most Americans, when you do public opinion polls, are supportive of gun control, especially in things like assault weapon bans and everything. Americans generally, in public opinion, are protective of recreational and hunting, you know, gun rights, but by the same token, they're very supportive of gun control overall. And so how the NRA has managed to be successful as it is a testament to their skill as an interest group and their ability to coordinate activities. And it makes it possible for a minority to essentially swing politics. All right, when we come back from break, we'll start up our political parties unit and try and work through as much as we can when we get back. Also, I wanted to tell you, I will put together, hopefully today, but by probably tomorrow at the latest, an extra credit assignment with OpenSecrets.org. So I will post that to Blackboard and email out an announcement. And so you can look for that. It will be due sometime either the Thursday or the following Tuesday after break. So, but I'll get the assignment out before break for those of you who want to do it. So look for your email about that.